All right, yeah, I'll introduce Spanners here. Spanners is the presenter of Missed Apex podcast over there in the UK. Well, it's a bit of an international
Yeah, man.
podcast, right? So we thought you would get you and Spanners today to talk. Well, you can be a bit of a UK correspondent for us. But
Represent all of the UK. All right.
yeah, yeah, you'll be representing all of the UK. We'll talk to you about. I guess we just want to. I mean, this was sort of more news a week ago, but we might as well get to it. Um, Sort of the Formula One's. Your podcast is around Formula One and the sort of response that Formula One has had to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So we wanted to talk about that and maybe some other things around Formula One and sports and politics.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, that sort of thing. So maybe you could fill us in on how Formula One has sort of reacted to the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, of course, it can feel a bit trite at times when there's an invasion and so much suffering here over in the eastern side of Europe and Ukraine, and I'm sure you guys as well have your hearts and minds are with the people of Ukraine, and we're all sat at home very frustrated, especially like in the UK. Obviously, in the other side of the world, you're watching it with, I'm sure, the same horror we are. Over in Europe, of course, it's all a bit close, and everyone's thinking of more direct consequences within their lives, and very interesting conversations all up and down the country about at what point does it really affect us, what is it we need to do. There's lots of people contemplating pulling boots on and going and helping. It is that close to us. Of course, cost of living, are we willing to take a cost of living sacrifice to cut off Russian oil? These are the everyday considerations of people here in Europe. So it can feel a little bit trite to talk about its effect on Formula One, but of course these sporting events do go on, and I think the things that sports bodies do and say matter and have an effect. That, in my opinion, there's a long history of sporting sanctions having an effect on the world stage. So it was interesting to see the FIA's response. And when you look at the initial reaction, there was a fear that it was going to be non-committal and hesitant, because the wording was very neutral. Oh, we're monitoring the situation. We're going to see how it goes, and that led a lot of people to think there wasn't going to be this strong response from the FIA. Something I learned, that in legal terms, if the stock price can be affected by an event, there's actually a legal obligation to put something out. So, there'll have been lawyers there saying you must make some kind of statement, and that's why it seemed a bit neutral. But the action has been fairly unilateral. We were expecting the Russian Grand Prix to not go ahead this year for sure, but actually it's gone further than that. They've terminated the contract with the Russian promoter. So it's not just this Russian Grand Prix this year, it's the future Russian Grand Prix. And of course, there was a new venue that was going to take over from Sochi. So it really has been a very clear statement. No, we're not going racing in Russia now, and and we're not going for the foreseeable future.
It's interesting that that is happening, Spanners. And I mean, you're in the UK. I don't know how much this is a worldwide story about our 1981 Springbok tour. But a very famous, 1981 Springbok tour happened in New Zealand at the time of apartheid, and New Zealanders, it split the nation. Half the people saying that we shouldn't have Springboks here, because of their race-based politics. Rugby fans kind of going, there's no place for politics in sport. But the story that we're all told is that on Ellis Island, Nelson Mandela heard of what was going on in New Zealand. Heard there was this is the Eden Park test, if people are watching, which is known as the flower bomb test, because a plane came over here dropping flower bombs to stop dropping flower bombs down to stop the game from actually happening. And there you go. There's some photos of it. But there was another test. Actually, it might have been a test. It might have been a game between Waikato. I'm not sure, but in Hamilton. And they protesters got onto the field, dropped a whole bunch of debris, and then wouldn't get off, and they had to call the game off. The story we're told is that Nelson Mandela heard about that, and it gave him courage in Ellis Island from the people in New Zealand. Now, it's not quite sanctions, But I guess what I'm saying is politics and sports can go hand in
Yeah.
hand. And it seems to me
Yeah.
that the sanctions in Russia are some of the things that are probably making the biggest impact at the moment. We're seeing people, and I told the boys this yesterday, I should have gotten the clip, but we're seeing people on business channels in Russia toasting the death of the stock market. And the stock market is tanking because of the sanctions. So I don't care whether it's sanctions in sports, because that's obviously stops millions, hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of dollars going into their economy, or other sanctions. It seems that is effective in this instance, at least with what's happening between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, it's important not to overstate the expertise I have in world politics and the effects sanctions will actually have. But from a personal point of view, while Russia's invading countries right on our doorstep, and we don't know the future plan, we don't know where that will go next, and there's a lot of the rhetoric at the moment with action and whether we should take action is, if not now, when. Obviously there's a nuclear threat, but does that give him carte blanche to just do whatever he wants? And we are saying he, because I think a point that gets lost a lot is that Russia has also been invaded. No one is saying directing anger at Russia. It's at Vladimir Putin. So the argument on the sporting point of view is why punish Russian athletes? But from a personal point of view, whilst your country's invading a sovereign nation, I don't necessarily want to watch you guys playing ping pong. There's more important things. You guys need to go and sort that out. Russian people are also at war under a repressive regime. So there's certainly no objection from this call sign to restrictions and sanctions on Russian athletes, but I'm way out of my depth on the actual effect that would have.
Yeah, there's also a driver that has lost his seat as well, Spooners.
George, it's not a massive loss to the world of motorsport. We're talking about Nikita Mazepin, and he is the son of Ukrail. The company is Ukrail or Ukrali, and it is
UK.
Yeah. Okay, so Nikita Mazepin's dad, very chummy with Vladimir Putin, worth 1.3 billion. They've thrown some chump change at Formula One to let Nikita Mazepin drive in F1. He's been teamed up with the much fancied Mick Schumacher, son of 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher. And as you're showing on your video, the nickname Mazepin was well earned. Nikita Mazepin, as well as seeming of questionable character, obviously we don't know him as a person, he came into Formula One. In his first season, he finished 21st out of a 20-car grid, which is some achievement, and he had more spins than race starts. So it isn't a massive loss to Formula One. But what's quite interesting is that Gunther Steiner, the team principal of Haas, was saying very recently that Nikita Mazepin just didn't grasp that his situation was untenable. Obviously, he's a paid driver in Formula One. So if it was not for that money, there's no way on merit he would get into a Formula One team. And that's quite aside from the political issue. Yeah, there's some meaty crashes there. So look, this is a guy that is not well liked, is there purely for his money, doesn't have the talent to be a top Formula One driver, has not done well or been popular. So it's not a loss to Formula One.
So they're pretty happy about that, actually. Formula One's like, finally a reason to get rid of this prick.
So to be honest, even Haas are probably in a better position, even financially. So if you look at the livery on the car, they're actually sporting the Russian colours there of the sponsor as well. So on the surface, you could go, well, Haas are losing their paid driver. They need a paid driver to fund basically having a good driver, Mick Schumacher, and be able to go racing. But they have a third driver, which is I've forgotten his name now, Fittipaldi. I've forgotten his first name, I beg your pardon. But he brings money as a third driver contract. So because Mazepin's not driving, that unlocks another clause where he gets to pay more money to be the driver for those two seats. So some money will come in, and then they probably, so we heard earlier today from Matthew Carter, ex-Lotus CEO, they're going to bring in Giovinazzi, who is going to come with an engine discount from the Ferrari engines they use. So all in all, financially, it might be win-win. And they don't seem devastated to lose Mazepin either.
Although it's always fun to watch a crash, isn't it? Maybe the spectators won't be quite so happy.
Do you know, it's so funny. I say with Formula One, there's so many different kinds of fans. There's fans from a sporting point of view. I love the sport of it. I love seeing people dueling wheel to wheel and trying to get past each other. I like to imagine myself as that driver. I could do karting, do sim racing. I love the sport of it. But my son, like for example, he's 11. He'll be like, "Oh, well, did I miss any crashes? Did I
Yeah.
miss any?" You know, there's some
Yeah,
people that are there for the
I am
drama.
an 11-year-old boy, Spanners. Thank you for
Okay.
pointing that out once again.
Obviously,
Very true.
the danger element does add something special and to motorsport. For me, not particularly. If we could get rid of the danger completely, I would do that. But I know there are some people. The fact that they are on the edge of physical danger makes it more exciting for them. Colour me old and boring, but I always wince when there's a bit of a crash.
What about the Russian Grand Prix? Is that going to be missed by F1 fans?
It's a terrible track. It's
Okay.
got no atmosphere. I don't know what the new Russian Grand Prix track would have been like, but no, Sochi was always. I just want to say I was negative about Mazepin and the Russian Grand Prix before all this. So yeah, you know, I don't know if that colours things, but no, I don't think any of it will be missed, to be honest.
Hey, with your feet on the ground in the UK, Spanners, what's the feeling? I mean, we're talking about, you know, you're a commentator and a podcaster around F1, but sport in general. What about just the people, you know, your friends and family? What are they saying, talking about when it comes to what's happening in that region at the moment? What's the feel?
For a country that has not been able to agree on whether biscuits should be legal or not, we are, I think, surprisingly united. What's become clear is that there's been a misinformation campaign being targeted, I think, pretty effectively against the UK, probably coming from Russia, with lots of various campaigns like defund the BBC, anti-vax, quite probably Brexit, all being supported from the Putin administration. And so we've been a very divided country. But honestly, everyone I'm speaking to is pretty united in supporting Ukraine, and also people are just wondering what they can do, you know. And I'm ex-army, and I know that like a lot of people in that community are hoping for more information, because they go in, would I be useful? You know, if I'm a tradesman, I'm an ex-electronics engineer. I know a lot of ex-mechanics and ex-aircraft engineers, you know, and they're all asking the question, like, how useful would I be? You know, and that's the questions people are asking now. You know, it's not something far away that's going to get sorted out. This is on our doorstep. So it's a very present and real everyday concern. And I host a local radio show, and I have to say, we've noticed the interactions on those shows have gone way down in the last couple of weeks. Call-ins, you know, no one seems to want to call in and talk about, you know, the roundabout where people get gummed up, or cats stuck up trees, or gardening issues. It feels like everybody is just glued to the news, because you know, it could have an immediate effect at any point.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean,
sorry, I brought it down.
No. Not at all. Chewy, you got something checking?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, just as far as comparisons, obviously the Saudi F1 fixtures are quite important, and there hasn't really been any, you know, we didn't talk about cancelling those races with their activities in Yemen and that sort of thing. I guess this ties in with a few things that me and my friends have been talking about, is that compared to, say, Afghanistan, Yemen, Middle East, yada, 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 the whole Ukraine thing is very different. The reaction from everybody is very instant and is very united. And I find that quite interesting. But I mean, was there any chat around F1 sanctioning Saudi Arabia for their activities?
Yeah, loads. Yeah.
Oh, there was?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So why not that then and this now? What's the difference?
So I mean, I couldn't tell you what the exact difference is for the FIA. Obviously, everybody's, you know, making their own judgment calls. I have my own personal history with having voiced objections professionally to Saudi Arabia and been taken off, not broadcast projects, but of engineering projects. So yeah, my value judgment isn't necessarily always going to line up with the media and with what the FIA or sporting bodies want to do. There is a geographical human instinct, because for us, you know, Ukraine is there. I don't know how much of that is a factor, or how much that would affect, you know, you guys if things are geographically different in comparison to where you are.
It's one of those. That's actually part of the commentary that's been coming out in the last couple of weeks, more about commentating on what's going on. Is that it seems that parts of Europe are now going, holy crap, there's a war in our neighborhood. What are we supposed to do when there's been wars ad infinitum in other parts of the world that haven't seemed to have engendered the same concern for the civilians of those cities?
Okay, so the elephant in the room is. The elephant in the room is: do we care more because it's white people? And I don't know if it's coming across on the on the screen, but I'm a few different varieties of skin tone. My dad called me his Heinz 57. You know, I'm definitely a mongrel, and yeah, that will be an issue for some people. That you keep hearing the reports like, oh, it's not some faraway place. They're just like us. Yeah, you mean white? And I hear what you're saying, but honestly, I think the geography and the closer political links is what really brings it in. And if you're talking about F1, you know, F1 is predominantly a European sport. That's probably moving over to America. So I can't tell you the motivations for other people, but I can tell you what the geography of this situation is jarring for us in the UK.
Yeah.
Because it's next door.
Yeah,
sorry,
because
it's next door.
Close. Yeah,
well, it's next door, and also, you know, it's going to affect everyday people's everyday lives all the way from. Okay, for example, tell me if I'm getting you down, but you know, having conversations with the wife, I said, no, well, they might want people like me over in the Ukraine, and she's very keen to point out that I'm old and fat. You know, she's you're old, you're fat, you're unfit. What job are you going to do? I'm like, okay, but fat 41-year-old me with bad knees, or that 32-year-old lad who's got absolutely no idea what he's doing, can't pick up a spanner, doesn't know which way around a rifle is. And she's saying like flat out no. I'm saying, okay, well, what if it was France? What if it was France? What would you say? And her answer is, well, of course, the answer is yes. So I say, okay, well, what about Germany? And she sees the game I'm playing. And, you know, these aren't completely impossible scenarios as it creeps closer. So, yeah, the geography of it can be alarming.
Before we wrap up, George, I've got a couple of just F1 questions. Am I allowed to ask them? Or are we running?
No, you go for it, Pat.
Okay, so 2 questions. When COVID kicked in big time and everyone was locked in the house for about a year, and all the racing circuits weren't happening, there was this e-racing that took off where race car drivers were in a box racing against other race car drivers on the other side of the world. I'm not 100% sure whether they did that in F1, but I certainly saw that in some Australian.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Okay. Did you enjoy that sort of virtual racing? Because I tell you what, I don't watch a lot of F1, but I watched a lot of that because it had a different and a unique take on it. That's my first question. And my second question is simply, greatest ever F1 driver. Go.
Okay. Well, the second one's easy. Statistically, it's Lewis Hamilton.
Oh.
No, do you know what? I'm 41, so I was watching a lot of F1 in the 80s and 90s, and Schumacher came along and just ruined everything. It's like, oh my God, you're winning everything. And I was a bit guilty of anyone but Schumacher, kind of as fan of anyone but Michael Schumacher. And then just as we think, oh good, the German threat has dissipated, along comes Sebastian Vettel. So, you know, we've suffered a lot, and at that time they were also hammering us at football as well. So but yeah, Lewis Hamilton has come along. I've been a huge fan of his, the way he races, the way he's an ambassador for the sport, and just his relentlessness. And the people who've gone up against him have said, you know, it's the consistency. It's not just being fast over one lap or fast over one race. It's the consistency. If you ever play golf and you do that one shot from 150 yards and it bounces beautiful and it just rolls into the cup and you go, that could have been a professional on telly. Yeah, that's great. But then you got to do it again and again and again. And that's what makes you great. So for me, Lewis Hamilton is holding that greatest of all time tag. Esports. I love esports. I'm massively into iRacing. We do loads of iRacing at Missed Apex podcast. There's a difference between esports and sim racing. I think what the Formula One drivers were doing was esports. So it's, hey, you guys at home have a wheel or a joypad and go and play for the Formula One game, because it was on brand. I didn't find that so much as enjoyable. They were having a bit of a laugh, but it was good. But the big upshot of that was a lot of real world drivers at levels below getting into things like iRacing and actually being in those lobbies. I was jumping online and you could be racing Romain Grosjean, you could be racing Fernando Alonso, Rubens Barrichello, all very active in those forums and all very friendly on the chat and everything like that. So that was a real thrill. And you want to kind of go, oh yeah, just because you're a real driver, it doesn't mean you'll be fast in a sim. Yeah, generally, yeah, they're like crazy fast. I was so pleased. Yeah, you would see them do very well. Grosjean's very, very quick there, and like I was so proud that I stopped him lapping me. You know, he was closing up, he was about to lap me, and I kept him 2 seconds behind. I was so pleased.
Spinners, what do you feel about the We Racers One campaign? So for the others, the We Racers One message was Formula One's attempt, I guess, to respond to the Black Lives Matters movement in America, and maybe a bit of Lewis Hamilton's pressure on the organization to say something about equality and this sort of thing. And the news has come out, and you can tell us more, maybe Spinners, that they're not going to be doing this sort of ceremony that maybe you can explain the ceremony they do at the start of races.
Yeah, there was an opportunity for people to show their support of the anti-racism message. Someone did it in video form. Some people took the knee. I guess that's a personal choice. If you look at what they did, it seems to align with other comments they've made. So none of that was a surprise. Mercedes seemed to have led the way, changing their livery to black for 2 seasons. And whilst the initial message and that procedure at the start of the race will have gone, there does seem to be a lot of work going on in the background. So I've been very lucky to get involved with some grassroots stuff, helping. It's not just people of color, but also getting more women into that media space as well. So, I was sat training 2 women to do a podcast, and one of those is now the stadium announcer for a lot of the tracks. And so it's about having that visibility. So now if you're a young girl and you go trackside, you see this fantastically glamorous and talented woman doing her thing, being the one to talk to all the drivers, and you go, well, that could be me. You know, you can't be what you can't see. And actually what's interesting with this media push to get more diversity into media is there was this myth of, oh, well, if we bring more black people or more women in, we're just going to dilute the talent pool. Well, do you know what? It turns out that once you looked, there was absolutely tons and tons and tons of talent that wasn't necessarily white middle-aged men. They were there. They were there the whole time. Everyone just had to turn their heads and look, and it is making a difference. And now for generations of people looking upwards, they can see people like them. So I do think it wasn't just a gesture. I do think it's had an effect. And there was a lot of work in the background bringing people up. They were always there. They just needed the will to do it.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on, Spinners. I know it's probably like 10:30 or something.
It's definitely sherry o'clock, George. Yeah, I won't lie to you.
Time to have a drink and then hit the hay. But yeah, as Pat's got up there, Missed Apex podcast. You guys have been doing that for a few years now, right?
Yeah, it's been a minute. We started in 2014. We started the podcast. Then it's been great. I think we're probably the biggest independent one that doesn't have backing from like a corporation or anything like that, and it's really lovely. I mean, if I can I show off? Can I boast a little?
Yeah, go.
I mean, you guys superstars, whatever. But I mean, for Abu Dhabi, we got 50,000 eyes and ears on our show for our race review. You know, we were regularly getting 35, 40,000, and I'm just in a shed, lads. Do you know what I mean? I'm just literally in a shed in my garden, and it's been wonderful. But it's all been just a great community of not only contributors. You know, we've got like a 15-strong team of panelists, a really great community of patrons in our like Slack forum, and just a really nice vibe and buzz around the show. It is really a wonderful place to be and hang out. But I would say that missedapex.net.
All right. We better get moving because we're going to shift gears and talk COVID here in a second.
Talk about bringing it down, George. Hey, thanks, man. Really appreciate you joining us, mate.
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Nice chatting, mate.